It is the year 2025, and right now we have a certain Aussie who is known for his cool and calm appearance by the name of Oscar Piastri, leading the championship by 31 points to his teammate of Lando Norris. But as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, that 31-point gap is becoming more and more daunting by the day and becoming a harder task for Lando Norris to overhaul. And considering he started the season as the favourite heading into the 2025 championship, then in Australia he won the race with Oscar Piastri all the way down in 9th, it looked like Lando Norris could potentially go on a run and try to get this championship. But it just hasn't come to pass, with him having multiple DNFs, whether it be from bad luck. He's also had some personal mistakes that have put him where he is right now. But after all of the races we've had so far, it's now made his teammate Oscar Piastri the favourite for the title. So my question today is, how does Lando Norris win the Drivers' Championship? Or is there even a way he can? So we'll start off with scenario 1, and this scenario is just basically easily called DNFs. So it's pretty straightforward what I'm getting at here. For this scenario, Lando Norris needs Oscar Piastri to have a DNF, whether it be mechanical or whether it be through a tangle with another driver. Because even if Oscar Piastri gets a DNF right now, the championship fight will now be back down to 6 points between the two, and that's game on from there. However, considering Oscar Piastri hasn't had a DNF since COTA 2023, it's going to be a very, very hard scenario to happen, and it's definitely probably the hardest person to ask their downfall on DNFs wise, considering he's actually going on a record here that's going down in F1 history for how long he is going without a DNF, finishing constantly. But here it goes. So let's say we go to next race weekend and it's Baku. Realistically, it could be happening at any of the next races we come to. But we have Piastri in first, Lando Norris in second. Realistically, a Piastri track should be Piastri first, right? Well, Norris has the inside of the first corner. He's about to take Oscar Piastri. Oh my, it's close. They've collided. They've crashed. What has happened? Lando Norris goes on to win the race with Oscar Piastri having a DNF. Then, from this point onwards, the gap is now 6 points, and it is game on. So, where would Lando Norris win to Oscar Piastri's? Well, in my head, in those next 7 races, 4 really stick out as Lando Norris races in this scenario to Piastri's 3. Would be Singapore, COTA, Mexico, and Abu Dhabi, whereas Piastri would get Vegas, Qatar, and Brazil. However, in this scenario, we're going to go with Norris getting all of the sprint race wins, and after this scenario, Lando Norris would come across the line to win the championship by 4 points, or even more if anything else happened, like a second DNF to Oscar Piastri. But realistically, in this scenario, the main thing that can't happen for Lando Norris, and this is in all of the scenarios, is he doesn't get another DNF, or he doesn't get a result lower than second place now. Now into scenario 2, and this is the most unrealistic of the 3 scenarios I'm going to give today, and it really is just because it's the pure pace scenario. So in this scenario, it's basically asking Lando Norris to win every single race weekend. Now, I'm not going off the unrealistic fact that Lando Norris is going to win every single race and sprint race, no, but there is a slightly more realistic way that Lando Norris dominates and Oscar Piastri ends up losing the championship, and it looks a little like this. Lando Norris, the ladies love him because he's always coming second. However, that is about to change, as over the next 8 races, he becomes a racing god, winning 6 of the next 8 races. Now, like I mentioned, there's 4 main ones I could see him winning: Singapore, COTA, Mexico, Abu Dhabi. But then if he had to win 2 more wins to his name, the most realistic ones would be if it was Brazil in the dry. In this scenario, Brazil's very much bone dry. And then Qatar as well, because it could be close between him and Piastri in Qatar. And then Piastri would pick up the other 2 wins in Baku and Vegas. And again, with Lando Norris winning all of the sprint races again, it would then end up with Piastri and Norris ending the season with exactly the same points on 503. However, Lando Norris would come to win the championship on countback. So again, it would get super, super close. And this is when Lando's been absolutely dominant. for the rest of the season, basically. It still gets that close. So again, you can see why I'm a little bit weary of this scenario, even on the more realistic side of it. As again, it depends on Lando Norris being absolutely dominant, which he just hasn't shown this season so far. Anytime, a lot of his wins have come from strategy blunders for Piastri, so it'd really be Norris stepping up. And again, it also depends on Norris, and to be fair, Piastri, both of them, finishing in the top 2 on all of the last races, which could happen. But at the end of the day, there's probably going to be a race where Ferrari, Mercedes or Verstappen come into play again. So also that is quite unrealistic of itself. And that is why for me, that is the most unrealistic scenario. Scenario 1 is still slightly more realistic. But now we get onto the most realistic scenario of the bunch, and it's scenario 3, which is basically a bit of both. It's F1 being F1. In F1, it can get quite messy sometimes with crashes, slow pit stops, different strategies and different cars being fast at different individual circuits. And in this way, for Lando Norris to win the championship, he sort of needs a combination of all of them to help him take the title. And in my head, this is exactly how it would go. Baku, McLaren come back swinging. However, Piastri takes the win with Norris in second. The gap is back to 38 points. We head over to Singapore. Again, like Hungary and Zandvoort, probably going to be a McLaren dominated track. However, this time round, Norris has done good here before. Norris wins. The gap is back to that 31 points. Now heading into Kota, and this is one of the first tracks in a while that we have the rest of the field coming back into play. Hello everyone else, welcome back to the front, especially Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell. What can they do? Well, this time round, Lando Norris wins with Oscar Piastri only managing third. However, in the sprint race, they finished 1-2. So what does that mean? The gap is now down to 20 points. Now into Mexico, and similar to Kota, we have the likes of other drivers getting in the mix. And this time round, Max Verstappen actually ends up taking the win, with Piastri second and Norris third. So the gap would then go back up to 23 points. Then heading into Brazil, another McLaren track, if it does not rain, and Lando Norris will take the race win. If it does not rain, and in this scenario, it does not rain, so Norris comes first with Oscar Piastri second in both this race and the sprint. The gap is now 15 points. Then into Vegas, which was a Mercedes track in 2024, it's going to be another track where everyone starts to get a little bit in the way of McLaren. Norris only manages second, and after Piastri has a few issues with his car, he can only manage fourth. The gap is 9 points. Then heading into Qatar, they have a battle of the ages, with Norris and Piastri being tied together so closely. However, Norris ends up winning the race. However, Piastri wins the sprint race. The gap is 3 points. Then finally heading into Abu Dhabi, another track Lando Norris is actually good at, like in 2024 when he won. Lando Norris wins the final race of the season, wins in Abu Dhabi to take the championship. Oscar Piastri second. The gap is 4 points. So yeah, it's still very much out there, but it also sort of takes into account the likes of Verstappen winning races, Ferrari still being in the mix, Mercedes potentially winning a race like in Vegas. It's the more realistic one of the bunch because that's the way F1 would go if something like Lando Norris winning a championship was going to happen. As anything can happen in F1. What the hell is that noise? Oh my god! It's Max Verstappen! Surprise scenario, Max Verstappen wins the title. All of a sudden, McLaren lose a chunk of their pace and they just get engine failure after engine failure. And Max Verstappen, he takes advantage of it as a very good driver he is himself. Time for Max to turn it up to the max. He wins in Baku, Singapore, Kota, Mexico, Brazil, Vegas, Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Winning all the sprints as well, ending on 454 points. And after Piastri DNFs in Baku, Vegas and Qatar, 3 second places and 3 third places, and then also 3 third places in the sprint, he only ends on 441 points, meaning Max Verstappen wins the title by 13 points, becoming a 5-time world champion. And Lando Norris, if you want to know what happened to him, he most likely DNF'd out of all of those races with engine failures like I mentioned. Who even doubted that he was going to do it? It was clear that he had been the favourite for the title ever since Monza. Simply lovely. But of course, I only add this scenario in as a surprise one, just to sort of show that yes, we can predict exactly, most likely, what's going to happen. I would say at the minute, Piastri's probably got an 80% chance of winning the title, with Lando Norris having the 19% chance that's left, and not kidding you, 1% to the likes of Max Verstappen. Because in F1, Anything can happen. This is why we love the sport. Realistically, if Avengers Endgame bollocks, yeah, if you did 1 in 10 million endings to this final season, Max would win one of them because the McLaren duo would collide or have problems in all of the final races. So yes, even though it's most likely not going to happen, anything can happen in this championship. The race is still on, even though I was slightly pessimistic about it before. So let's see exactly what happens in the end of the 2025 season. And hey, hopefully team orders won't happen because, that would never happen between the McLaren pairing, right?